My name is Jake, and I am a bookish drummer. All right, it's that time of year again. We're about halfway through the year, so it is, of course, time for the mid-year book freakout tag. And I'm assuming y'all probably know what the mid-year book freakout tag is all about. Basically, it's a list of questions that's kind of like summarizing the first half of the year so far, your favorite reads, your least favorite reads, disappointments, surprises, what's upcoming for the second half of the year, that kind of stuff. So doesn't really need that much of an introduction, so yeah, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into it. So the first question is, of course, best book of the year. What's been my favorite book of the year so far? And for me, I'm going to disclude, is it disclude or exclude? Are those words? What is happening? I won't be including rereads because I've been doing a lot of rereading this year, but excluding those, I'm going to have to go with Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. This book really surprised me with how much I loved it. I knew going in that I was probably going to enjoy it because I also read The Martian by Andy Weir and I gave that 4 stars. I really enjoyed it, but a lot of people were saying that Project Hail Mary was even better. And some people, like Jessie May, for example, like one of her favorite all-time books was The Martian. And then even she was like, oh yeah, Project Hail Mary is way better. And I'm just like, okay, well, I got to read it now. So I was very pleasantly surprised by how much I thoroughly loved that book. Easy 5 stars. I loved it from start to finish. And just one of the best endings ever. And it's really hard to talk about that book like in particular, because basically all you need to know going into it is that a guy wakes up in space with amnesia. He doesn't really know who he is. He doesn't know how he got there. It's basically him figuring that all out. And the journey we go through and surprising amounts of emotion towards the end of the book was just very good. And like I said, the ending was just mwah, chef's kiss. So yeah, that's my favorite book of the year so far. And so far, not really much has come close to it. Maybe Hyperbole and a Half by Ali Brosh. That was just a really fun time, which I also gave 5 stars, but just Project Hail Mary. Best book of the year so far. And question number 2 is best sequel of the year. Best sequel that I've read so far this year. And for me, I haven't read too many sequels, but probably my favorite sequel that I've read this year, like I said, excluding rereads, the best new sequel to me that I've read this year has to be Until the Last of Me. Until the Last of Me. I cannot speak today. Until the Last of Me by Sylvain Neville, which is the second book in his Take Them to the Stars trilogy. Now, I liked this a little less than the first book, A History of What Comes Next, but I still had a really fun time with this book. Really, my only main complaint is that it's too short, which is not a common complaint for me. My more common complaint is that books are unnecessarily long. But for me, like, this book was even shorter than the first book, and I really would have liked a little bit more meat to the bones, especially for the more like action-packed scenes. Like those kind of went by really quickly. But still, the scenes in this book were really good, and I love the character work just as much as I did in the first book. And the ending to this book is just bonkers. I literally could not predict what was going to happen, and I cannot predict what's going to happen in the third book. Because the way this book ends, I don't know where we go from here. And that's why I love Sylvain Neville, because his writing is just so unpredictable. So definitely the best sequel that I've read so far this year. number 3 is new release that you haven't gotten around to yet. And for this one, I'm going to have to go with the 3rd book in the Obsidian Path trilogy. I think it's called An End to Sorrow. I'll put it right here. I own the first 2 books, but I don't believe... I don't think the 3rd book is out yet in paperback, or if it is, I haven't gotten it yet. But I have the first book, Blackstone Heart, which I really enjoyed, and then I have the sequel, speaking of sequels, She Dreams in Blood, which I also really liked. I think I liked this book slightly more. This book kind of felt just more of the same of the first book, but the way that the second book ends is tremendous and just out of nowhere, like, what the fuck is going on? And I really enjoyed that, so I really want to jump into the sequel, or the final book in the trilogy, An End to Sorrow, pretty much as soon as possible, but, you know, I have a lot of books to read, so hopefully I can get to that soon. No promises, but yeah, Michael R. Fletcher in the Obsidian Path trilogy, quickly becoming one of my favorite fantasy trilogies, so that's my answer for number 3. And then question number 4 is about new release for the second half of the year that I'm excited for. And there's a lot of new releases that I'm excited for. Taylor Jenkins Reid, Lisa Jewell. Oh yeah, Stephen Graham Jones isn't coming out till next year. But anyway, my answer, I have 2 answers for this one. The first one is The Lost Metal by Brandon Sanderson, which I'm probably the most excited for, simply because I've been waiting for that book for years. I'm a huge fan of Mistborn Era 2. I think it's better than Mistborn Era 1, definitely. I know that's unpopular, but fight me. But then the other one is, of course, Fairy Tale by Stephen King, which, of course, I'm excited for obvious reasons. But yeah, those are probably my 2 favorites, or not favorites, those are my 2 most anticipated releases for the second half of the year. And question number 5 is biggest disappointment. Now, I've been doing pretty good this year for DNFs. Like, I've been averaging like 1 DNF a month, which is not bad. But last month in May, for some reason, I had several DNFs. I had 4. But probably my biggest disappointment was Mary Jane. And I thought I was going to love this book. I heard the premise. I read it. My buddy Sharon Dwyer mentioned this book, and I read the premise because it's supposed to be similar to like Daisy Jones and the Six, and like this couple is like hiding out a rock star who's hiding out in secret because of stuff, and like he's supposed to like tell his story. And I immediately read that. I was like, I have to read this book. I'm gonna love this book. But the publishing company, or whoever's in charge of the marketing, just straight up lied, because I read the first 4 or 5 chapters and you essentially get none of that. It's this little girl who's babysitting this other girl for this family who is, you know, hiding away this rock star, but there's nothing, it's like nothing to do with the rock star. And maybe like later on in the book you get that, but from the pace that it was going at and just the style of writing, I was just severely disappointed. I DNF'd it, and I was so angry. It's not the book that I wanted it to be. And I read reviews of it like that felt the same towards me, and they said that it didn't really get any better. So I was very disappointed with that. So yeah, that's probably my biggest disappointment of the year, is Mary Jane. Now, on the flip side of that, biggest surprise of the year for question number 5, I was pleasantly surprised by this book. This was a book that my girlfriend Stacy, one of her all-time favorite books, and she basically pressured me to buy this book and to read it, which I'm, in hindsight, very glad that she did, because I loved it. I gave it 5 stars, and that would be Hyperbole and a Half by Ali Brosh. I thoroughly enjoyed this. Definitely one of the funniest books that I've ever read. And if you don't know, like, it's essentially like the author, Ali Brosh, like, just drew all of these like really bad drawings, And each chapter is basically like something that happened in her life, either as a child or as an adult. And it's just really funny stories about like her dogs and like adulting. And it was just a really fun time. I read it with Stacy and a couple of my other friends on Discord. It was hilarious, and it's definitely a book I can go back and reread again and again just because it's so funny. But yeah, definitely the biggest surprise, because when I bought this, I was like, maybe it'll be good. But it turned out to be really good, really great, and one of my favorite reads of the year. Question number 7 is favorite new author. So the way I'm going to answer this question is I will be answering it since I did this last tag last year. And my answer for last year was Taylor Jenkins Reid. But since then, because this year I haven't really been reading a whole lot of new authors, whereas last year, like the tail end of last year, I was reading a lot of new authors. And since then, I'm going to have to go with Stephen Graham Jones, who I've said in a lot of my videos is quickly becoming one of my favorite horror writers and one of my favorite authors in general. So yes, I think at this point, he's probably a top 10 author, I would say. He's written a lot of great books. I haven't loved everything he's written, but I've loved a lot of books, including this one, which may or may not be my favorite, Night of the Mannequins. Love this novella, gave it 5 stars. And yeah, he's probably my new favorite author since I've done that last tag. And hopefully when I do this tag next year, I'll have a more cohesive and better answer. But yeah, Stephen Graham Jones, can't go wrong with him unless you're not a horror fan. Then I guess you could go wrong. I don't know. Question number 8 is new fictional crush. And I better not answer this question. Stacy might be watching. And I will always love you. And question number 9 is new fictional character. And speaking of Stacy, this answer might not count because I've read this character before. It's not new to me, but it was a new experience because I read You Love Me by Caroline Kepnes to Stacy, my girlfriend, and this was such a fun experience to read this book to her on Discord voice chat. And basically, if you don't know, this book is written in first person and second person because it's the character of Joel Goldberg, who is this very creepy dude who's a stalker and just not a great guy. And he's narrating in first person, but he's acting like he's speaking to the person that he's stalking or that he's become obsessed with. So it was very fun to like read the book to her in Joel Goldberg's voice. So it was a lot of fun to read the book to her in its entirety. So yeah, Joel Goldberg is one of my favorite characters, and it was fun to experience the story while reading her the book for the first time. So for that one, I'm going to go with Joel Goldberg. I'm nothing like Joel Goldberg, by the way. And number 10 is a book that made you cry. Now, books don't really make me cry. They can get an emotional reaction out of me or like a visceral reaction out of me, but generally I don't cry. But if I had to pick a book that was pretty close and it was very emotional and I know it makes a lot of people cry, I'm going to go with Sword of KAIGEN by M.L. Wong. Now, when I was first reading this book, I knew people said that the beginning was rough, but I didn't know it was going to be that rough. Like the first 4 chapters, I really didn't give a shit about. But then you get further into the book and it starts to get better and better. And then you get to the emotional stuff like chapter 17 and then chapter 27, which if you've read the books, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. Those scenes are very emotional and I can definitely see why it can get such an emotional reaction out of people. And it did me, but like I said, I don't really cry during books. I don't really even cry during movies. The one thing I will cry about is music. Music can definitely move me to tears, but books, not so much. But Sword of KAIGEN, like I said, definitely a very emotional book. Very cathartic. And number 11 is the opposite, a book that made you happy. Now, this book basically just brought a smile to my face the entire time I was reading it, and that would be The Boy Who Failed Show and Tell by Jordan Sonnenblick, who you can probably recognize that name because I talk about his book Drums, Girls, and Dangerous Pie constantly on this channel, one of my all-time favorite books, and that book brings a smile to my face as well. But this one was just so much fun. The characters, he's so charming, and basically Jordan wrote this as kind of like not like a memoir, but like a funny retelling of like his own life experiences when he was in middle school. I really liked it. It was very charming, very fun, and it definitely brought a smile to my face the whole time I was reading it. And question number 12 is the most beautiful book that you bought this year. The most purty book. I got a purty book here, y'all. I don't know why I said it like that. But I bought this when Stacy and I were shopping at Barnes & Noble. The plan was for me to get her some more books because earlier in the day we had gone to several bookstores. But we went to Barnes & Noble and I ended up getting this book, which I think is gorgeous. And that would be Once Upon a Time in Hollywood by Quentin Tarantino. Now, I already own this book in paperback because he published it in paperback first and then hardcover because Pulp Fiction, right? And I don't usually pay money for books that I don't need, right? Or that I don't absolutely need. But this one, man, I love Quentin Tarantino, and it has like bonus stuff of like pictures and interviews, like in the back of the book, or in like the middle of the book and the back of the book. And the cover is really cool, right? So I couldn't resist. So yeah, that's probably the most beautiful book that I bought this year. And the last question is 13. What books do you need to finish by the end of the year? There's not really a lot of books that I need to finish, but there are some books that I would like to finish that I would hopefully be able to finish. And one of those is definitely my reread of the Dark Tower series. I've been basically doing one book a month. I skipped May, and this was supposed to be read in May, but actually I'm going to read The Wind Through the Keyhole in June, and then, slowly catch up on finishing the Dark Tower reread this year. And then another reread I want to get done is Mistborn Era 2. So I'll probably start Alloy of Law in August, right? Because first book in August, second book in September, third book in October, and then the fourth book comes out in November. So yeah, book math. So yeah, those are two rereads that I would like to get done. Other than that, I'm basically just going to be mood reading, like whatever I want. I'd like to get a couple more Malazan books done. And obviously, there's Stephen King books that I'm dedicating myself to read, like the Richard Bachman books, and then my Patreon picks every month, right? So there are some books that I do really want to get to, but nothing is like set in stone, which I like a lot better than setting strict TBRs. I'm definitely turning into more of a mood reader, so yay. But anyway, that's the last question for the mid-year book freakout tag. What did you guys think of the questions? What did you guys think of my answers? And please let me know what your answers for this tag would be down in the comments below. And anyway, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my YouTube channel and the Bookastromer Discord. And if you'd like to further support me financially, go check out my Patreon page and see what that's all about. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching and have a terrific day.